Good morning, Joanna. How are you?
I am fabulous. How are you?
Really great, thank you. It's lovely to talk to you. You're looking so bright and happy, so that's a really nice sign, isn't it?
I try, absolutely. I try always to be bright and happy. Yes.
Now, what are you most looking forward to about the year 2023?
Do you know what? There is so much I'm looking forward to. There's so much from a business perspective that I'm looking forward to. I think it might be an unusual year, and I won't get too much into that because I think we will see a lot happening from a business perspective next year, good and bad. But we have lots of things that we're developing in the business, so I'm excited about that. But I'm also just a bit excited about travel. I love traveling and we're getting, right back into it again. So I don't know if that's what you meant, but I can't help but think about it. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think that's the thing about business, isn't it? We've got to have that thing that that gets us out of bed, and it's not the business every day. It's the why we're in business, and sometimes that's travel and spending time with family and doing fabulous
yeah.
things.
Absolutely. That's so true. That's so true. Trying to find the balance, because that is a tricky thing so
Yeah.
often, don't you
Yeah.
think? Trying to find that true balance. And we've been running really, really hard this year.
Mm.
And so I just thought, you know what? I just need some holidays to think about as well, because I love the business, but you've got to get away sometimes to give perspective as well.
That's a really good point. I was reflecting last night on the importance of creativity, and you can't be creative when you're busy.
Oh, so
Creativity by its
true.
very nature, you need time and space to let your brain just go to those places.
So true.
So that's really usually one of the important benefits of just taking a break is that your mind doesn't stop. You just allow it to go into other places and, have those marvelous ideas, hopefully.
Do you know what? I am most productive. I think I create the most value in our business in my hour of a morning when I go for a run, a jog or a walk by the beach.
Yeah.
When I'm doing nothing else, I'm listening to inspiring things. And then I just have all these ideas. And that actually is what shapes the best thing in the business. I thought to myself at one point, well, maybe I should just spend all day, every day just walking and
Well, I have a
coming up
similar
with ideas.
philosophy, but my ideas come when I'm in the shower. So I didn't
Shower all
imagine I could
day.
stay in the shower all day.
You'd be very clean.
One of the busy things you've been doing is your book, Buy Grow Exit,
Yeah.
which we're going to talk a bit about today, The Ultimate Guide to Using Business as a Wealth Creation Vehicle. But before we did, I wanted to introduce you to our WNA members and just a little bit about you, where you came from. You grew up in country Australia. Can you tell us a
I
bit
did.
about that, and also how that sort of childhood and growing up shaped, I guess, your values and how you reflect those today?
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. Do you know what? No one ever asked me about this. It's such an interesting way to start. So there you go, something completely different. So I grew up initially in a little, not actually a little country town, a fairly big country town called Wagga Wagga.
Yep.
And then when I moved to high school, I moved to the coastal town of Port Macquarie, where I
Beautiful
yeah,
place.
developed my love of the water, and I've just not been able to leave being around water ever since because water's so beautiful. But I had a fabulous, relaxed upbringing. My parents were really focused on just letting me make my own decisions in life. Like everything was very self-motivated, and I think that's an interesting thing that I try to bring into my parenting with my children as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Mm-hmm.
which is an interesting thing. But we also we grew up with my parents' fostered children, so I grew up with foster children around me
Okay.
in my
Yep.
early years,
Mm-hmm.
and I think some of those things, growing up with this idea of parents who thought beyond our own family unit as well, sort of gave me this thing in life. I think firstly, I can tend to pick country people a mile off because we're the people who just walk up and start talking to each other, and every now and again, I walk around the streets in Sydney and like people in Sydney, are always just looking down and, try not to make eye contact, which is such a funny thing to me. And every now and again, I just can't help it. I have to make eye contact
You're
with
the
people.
spark.
People think I'm a loony here in Sydney, but that's okay. I'm comfortable with that. But I think a country upbringing, there's this, number one, I have this inherent trust and like in people, it's sort of that closer community background, I think, and living in a family where, as I say, we grew up sort of thinking outside of just our own family circle. I think those sorts of things, have brought to business. Number one, I really like to try to find the balance for myself and for our staff. Absolutely. That's a huge thing for me. And it's not always easy to do, but it's a constant thing for myself because I love to work as well. So yes. Balance. Yeah. But trying to do the right thing and make a difference in the world, I think maybe that's, and trying always to find the way that what we can do creates a positive impact on people. I think that really came from my childhood, and I also like to bring joy as well. So I do think we're lawyers, and that can be a bit boring, right? I don't think people say they go to their lawyers to have a good time. So, quite often transactional or whatever. But I've tried to create a legal firm that has personality and connection, because I think when people are in those hardest places in their life, it's nice to have a real human that they can connect with as well, and not necessarily hard as horrible. We're with people who are selling their business, which is one of the most fabulous points of their life, but very, very stressful. It can be hugely stressful because this is the culmination of their life's work in so many instances, or it feels like that, to many people at that point. So there's a lot of emotion, and so I think it's nice to create a legal firm that's got a bit of, not just focus on excellence, which we absolutely do, and innovation, doing things differently, which are our two core values. But our third core value, which is actually our first, is care. So doing things in a way that connects and that recognises the people behind the business.
Fabulous. And of course, you didn't just start. You went through some of the big legal firms, so to speak. So you kind of have that very corporate, I suppose, background, but you've obviously said, maybe you do something a little bit different, or things in a different way. How did you niche into this area of particularly dealing with clients who are looking to sell businesses?
Yeah, and I guess firstly a comment on that sort of the larger firm environment, and it got to a point where I was hugely unmotivated, and which is a bit weird because anyone that knows me would know
hard,
that
even when they just see you now. Hard to imagine you as an unmotivated person.
I hit this thing because I think for me, I need connection. I need connection in what I'm doing, and I didn't feel connected dealing with large organisations where there was not necessarily an emotion for them behind what they were doing. It was just process, and I'm not good in that. I want to feel like we're doing something that really helps and makes a difference. So I think I can't even remember your question. I'm so sorry. I've gone off on this tangent.
The fact that you grew up, I guess you grew up in some ways in that corporate environment, but you wanted to create an environment that was quite different. But why did you decide to focus on the the buying and selling of businesses as an area? Brilliant. There's lots of areas of law I'm sure you could have,
There are, yes, absolutely, wonderful. So there were so many areas of law that are based around either, number one, more process, or number two, being argumentative and combative, and that's just not my personality. I don't like that. I don't like, and I talked for many years about risk because I think understanding risk is super important for a business owner, because I have seen those instances, and I talk about it in the book, where business owners have built this business not understanding risk and blown themselves up, and they've lost that asset that is their business. Hugely horrific for business owners who go through that stage. And so I talked about risk a lot because I think it's important, and I believe in education. But that didn't float my boat. Like, I was just like, I'm not a risk. I need I need to be able to find the positive and the opportunity and the great story that our clients can aim for. And I started reflecting back on business sale matters that I'd been involved in. And look, I've niched into this area for a long time now, but this is way, years and years and years ago. And I reflected on those stories where I'd seen these business owners, come to this amazing endpoint in their business with a really happy retirement and exit of their business. And then I see these instances where businesses have blown themselves up along the way, where they'd, lost all the value in their business, or worse still, what I saw then, and I still see so much of today, is businesses coming to the point of exit, but having no exit value, thinking that they've built this business as their nest egg because they have put so much time and money invested into the business, but done it without realizing what value is. And so I felt like, this is where I can add value. This is where I can talk about things that will really help them, rather than just risk, which is so important, stop the shit from blowing up. But I want to talk about what are the positive impacts you can make on your business? What are the small incremental changes that you can make that will have a massive positive impact at the end of the day? And so business sale and acquisition was ultimately was so the obvious choice. And look, I think I'm a deal maker at heart. I love to sniff out a deal and help people create the win-win, because and business sale and acquisition work is that, you're helping.
You can see you get a buzz from it. That's for sure.
I 100% do. And do you know what? I think people who are in this area have to, because you're dealing with people's lives. It's such an important time.
That there's a section in your book, and it's actually at the end, and I am one of these people who reads the end first and then goes back to the beginning just to see how it finishes. I'm a little impatient, but you talk at the end about the importance of purpose-driven companies, and in fact how much more successful purpose-driven companies tend to be. And obviously in your own example, you're very clear about what your purpose is. Just talk us through, what exactly a purpose-driven business is, and why that is so significant in terms of success, or some definitions of success anyway.
Yeah. So I mean, purpose-driven can mean so many different things to so many different people. And the part of the book you're talking about, I refer to a study by Deloitte where they're actually measuring the success that comes from purpose-driven organizations. So organizations, and I think what they mean by that is organizations that have a clear purpose, but also that is something outside of the organization itself, of course we've all heard of Simon Sinek's, the whole why, but I guess boiling it down into the very most basic elements. It's when you wake up in the morning, why are you going to work each day? Why are you creating this business at the end of the day? And if the why is something that is outside of, business owners quite often will create their own business for some of those fundamentals that are self-related, which completely makes sense, from an income perspective, trying to create control in their life. Although, ironically, sometimes, owning your own business ends up more work and less control. Right. But anyway, leaving that aside. But it's about finding that extra layer. And this is the big revelation that I had. And I sort of call it my epiphany, because I reflected, it was after I had my second child, my son, and the business was sort of running itself by then. And I'd niched into this area of business sale and acquisition, but you know what? I didn't feel the passion for it. And I was sitting there, and I'd sort of had this period of time off with Cooper, my son, and I just thought, what am I doing? I don't really want a legal firm. People are just fighting with each other all the time, and we've got to sit in the middle of it. And, I who am I helping? I'm not like doctors. I've got friends who are doctors and nurses, and they're saving people's lives. Isn't that amazing? Or friends who are teachers, and they're helping create the future of our children. I thought, I'm not doing anything like that. I can't look at myself in the mirror and feel that I have achieved what I want in life by a balance sheet in my life, by the assets. And I thought, I need to switch businesses. That's actually what I thought at the time. I can't run a legal firm. I need another business. And I started thinking about other businesses. And I'm quite entrepreneurial. I love lots of business anyway. But so the idea of thinking of starting another business wasn't, I thought, yeah, that's what I'll do. Like I'll give up the legal firm, I'll sell it or whatever, which is funny because this is quite often why people sell, because they haven't found the passion in what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I did that myself. And so I thought, well, what will I do with it? And then, I spent time just reflecting, and I thought of these stories, and I talk about this story of James, a client who it had really emotionally impacted me. I was a junior lawyer, and he'd come to our firm at the time, but his business he'd been trying to grow the business, trying to do what everyone from a growth perspective says, build the business so it's not dependent on you, get a general manager in, all of this sort of stuff, which is wrong, but it can just be dangerous. That's that thing. And he did that. And ultimately the end of the story is the business blew up. I mean, it didn't, the business imploded. It owed heaps of money. He went into liquidation. His accountant suggested that he go into personal bankruptcy. He had death threats. His wife left him. He had to sell all of his assets. And, it's just horrific. He had to let go of all of his staff. And, he came to the office this one day, and I was a really junior lawyer. He came to the office one day and sat down with me and said, what can I do? And he was in tears. And I just thought, we failed him in the legal profession. And I think that was the beginning of me feeling really disenchanted with the law. And as I reflected years and years later, after I'd had my son and I was having this period, I realized this is the thing. What I thought was wrong with the law and business back then was actually the opportunity. This is where we can make a difference.
I think one of the examples you give is where there's a couple selling the business, and they talk to their lawyer and they talk to their accountants, but they didn't talk to them together. So they had an accountant's perspective and they had a legal perspective, but it didn't come together. And it sounds like in many ways that's in fact the position that you were feeling yourself in, that you were taking it from a legal perspective, but really seeing that there could have and perhaps should have been a much broader view of how that whole scenario was coming together.
So true, so true. And when I was looking at it from those eyes of a very junior lawyer, I hadn't had the opportunity of experience to see the other sides yet, and it was only years later, reflecting back on it, when I saw the positives, that the positives in business and the positives of things done well, how well that can play out, that I realized, actually, I have an epic responsibility to try and help provide business owners with that understanding, and that's ultimately what was behind the book. I've got a podcast. I've got 2 podcasts actually that have been running for, more than 4.5 years. We've got more than 400 episodes there, the Deal Room and Talking Law. And I always provided free information in that way. But the book was sort of more of this culmination of ideas. It's sort of like the roadmap. Here's the 1, 2, 3, 4 about to help business owners, without them paying loads of money. I mean, we charge for the book, but it's very cheap. But the podcasts are all free, and so it doesn't cost business owners anything to get educated.
Yes.
I just wanted to be able to provide that roadmap of here's what horrendous can look like.
Yeah.
And this is in reality one of the risks. Here is what amazing looks like. What is the difference, and how can you make small differences every day that can point you towards the amazing as opposed to the horrendous?
So a lot of our listeners will be in business already, obviously, and hopefully doing well. And so when they look at your book in terms of buy, grow, exit, they probably naturally think, oh, I'm in grow, I want
Yeah.
to grow, but I think there's some really interesting concepts and frameworks that you put forward in the book, particularly the fortify methodology, which seemed to be a really useful approach no matter where you are in your business. But I guess my real question is it a linear thing? Do you start a business or buy a business? Do you grow the business and then exit it? Is it that sort of, okay, here we go? Because just thinking about what you said in terms of some of those clients that come to you, they've put their life into it, or a good chunk of it. They're emotionally attached to it, but actually, what is it? Is
Yeah.
there is there actually anything to exit from?
Oh, absolutely. And I see this day in, day out. And I speak to, brokers, business brokers who sell businesses day in, day out. And this is such a large component of the market. Business owners who have no understanding of what creates value and come to market or come to that point of exit or come to that point of retirement, hoping, expecting that their business will have value, but have no reason
Yes.
to for that, because they haven't built their business in that way. They've built the business to suit them at the time because they've
Yes.
just not understood the decisions that they're making along the way. But is it a one to sort of
Yep.
a clear path, buy, grow, exit? Even though the book Buy, Grow, Exit sort of is structured in a clear linear way, no, that it's not at all. And buy can be the beginning. So you might buy a business rather than starting a business from scratch. But buy can also be the middle and almost the end as well. So when I say that, what I mean is acquisition is, I think, one of the biggest opportunities for growth, as opposed to this slow organic growth through acquisition is this massive opportunity. And it's one of the things that I get really excited talking about, because I think that's where we can provide value that mostly is missed in the market for SMEs. So many SMEs miss that. So, in that sense, buy isn't always at the beginning. You might buy, grow, then go and buy a business again, and then grow some more. And then, one of the things that I say, I sort of talk about the contrarian advice is sometimes as you're coming to exit, maybe it's a good point to quickly buy again. We had a client that had listened to quite a few of my podcasts and had a brilliant business. But he said, it was interesting. I was listening to your podcast. I was coming up to exit. And so I started to look at the market, and I was looking at the market to get an understanding of the value of my business, because you said getting ready to exit, I should be really prepared and educated. And I realized that, the brokers were talking about my business valuation being a 4 times earnings, 4 times profit, value based on 4 times my profit. And I saw some businesses out there that were valued at 1 times profit. I thought, yeah, you suggested I could go and buy. I'm just going to go and buy one. So he made this small acquisition, right? He did. He made the acquisition. He brought it on board.
Yeah.
So that profit that he paid 1 times for now is worth 4 times, because his business is already at that 4 times EBIT value. And then he said to me, I wish I had have known this years ago. And that's the thing, and that is the thing, when people really click onto it and it works for them in their business, it's like this light bulb goes off, and that's so exciting. I love seeing that stuff like that juices me.
Can you talk me through then what are the values in a business that actually, obviously that profit measure is one, and assets and staff, and what are the sort of, if you looked at it on paper, or even if you owned a business, what should you be looking at in terms of, well, is my business saleable? Is it,
Yeah.
do I actually have something that I can exit from? Because I think, as you know, a lot of businesses do tend to be based around what's up here in
Yeah.
one or two individuals. And if you took them out of the equation, really what's left?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just preface this by saying, we talked about the cycle of buy and grow not necessarily being linear. So is exit. Exit also isn't linear. And in fact, thinking about exit should happen right at the beginning. And it's so important, so often missed. Most sellers really just they're not interested in thinking about exit until they're at the point of exit. And that's just too late to make any changes because the business is what it is by that point. And so what it means to bear exit in mind, and I talk, I've got a whole chapter about it. It's, number one, just get educated and understand the position that a buyer will be looking at your business from. Look at your business always through a buyer's eyes. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that you have to exit your business at the end of the day. It's a great strategy to also build a business in a way that you could just be an investor in the business, so that you have the participation in the business that you want, but are not controlled by it. Sometimes that is a better exit for people than selling the business. So it's not always about when I say exit, I guess I think of exit in a really broad way. But and when I say looking at a business from a buyer perspective, even if you're planning to never sell your business, the benefit of looking at it from a buyer's perspective is that you help to understand what is value in the market. And by doing that, you create options for yourself. And I was having this great discussion with someone just yesterday, and he was saying he sold, he thought he would never sell his business, right? Because he loved his business, like many of us do, and found it felt it was a real part of his identity, and he built it in a way that he thought he would be able to sort of run it in a way that he could run it for a long, long time without wanting to exit. But he then got divorced, and he didn't have the money to pay out his wife. They had to liquidate the assets. The business was the biggest asset. There was nothing he could do. They had to sell. And he said to me, I just wish someone had told me that just because I never thought I'd sell my business is not the indeterminate of whether that might be thrust upon me one day. You could end up sick. You could end up, changing, ideas of what you want to do in life. There could be external factors that happen. You could end up in divorce. You could end up arguing with your business partner, which, by the way, is, leads to a very large number of reasons for needing exit out of the business. I mean, there's so many, you change your passion, you change your ideas, whatever. So many reasons that you might be thrust into needing to sell your business, even if you think you never would. So you must always, no matter what you think your end plan is, you must always build your business in a way that you have options. And then coming back, sorry, this is a very long path to answer.
Go.
But coming back to your question, which is, well, what is value and in a business? Well, it depends on your business, and there is no universal answer. But it's just about educating yourself, and it's about buyers want the value in a business. So the first thing, what creates value in a business from the eyes of my buyers? Then the next thing is, how could I ensure that this value can be transferred without it needing me there to do the transfer? Because you might be there, you might be happy to, you might not be. So and then that comes back to recognizing how you set up your relationships with your customers, how you set up your relationships with your staff, how you lock in value in the business, and there's so many elements, and I sort of run through it. I sort of divvy it up into various categories of where value is in the business in the book, and give some ideas about how you can lock that in and create a pathway for them to be transferable. It also comes back to systems and processes, and setting up the business so it's not reliant on you. And to be absolutely clear, I don't profess to have all the answers. We talk about all of these things, but I'm not a systems and processes guru. I'm not a marketing growth guru. I can only come from the position of a lawyer, but boy, I have seen hundreds and hundreds of businesses at exit who have worked it out and who haven't. I guess, when I sat and reflected, it just painted that picture of what it was that those people who were doing, who achieved those amazing happy outcomes had done that was different to the rest.
And I think probably fundamentally it's as you said, sometimes there are times when you don't have any choice but to exit. Scenarios might be thrust your way, but it is thinking about a planned exit as opposed to things have gone so bad I have to exit. I think you talk about exiting in style, that sense of if you wanted to finish something, it's almost like it's not really finished, but it's ready to be handed on. Whereas I think probably a lot of us are guilty of, I'll just keep going and going and going until there's nothing left of it, there's nothing left of me, and hopefully someone will sell it. The great white knight on the horse will come in and give me a bucket of money and I'll live happily ever after.
Absolute. That is so, and you're 100% spot on with the mindset that quite often I see in business owners at exit. And and it's sad to say, but that is so the wrong time to sell your business, because you need energy to sell your business, to get it in right. And the business sale process actually is a really long process. But it's better that you understand that. It's better that you understand that from the outset. And sellers who understand that, who are prepared, will fare better because they've got more energy in the tank. But if you're selling your business because you've had it, which is it's a valid reason. And I completely understand that reason. You just have to be aware it's not as simple as it seems. And you are also not going to be able to realize the true value or the true potential, I guess, in the business if you're selling it at that point where you're right at the end and exhausted. And gosh, aren't so many business owners exhausted after the last couple of years?
Absolutely. And look, no doubt we will see a lot of turnover in businesses in the next couple of years as people who are exhausted and just can't do any more, feel they just need to get out. And it would be nice to think that they have that energy to do it in a way that leaves them feeling good about the process and not having to recover from the process of running a business.
Oh, absolutely. That's so true. That's so true. And so you've got to, and I guess this sort of, comes back to the point that I made right at the beginning when I had my epiphany. But it is stepping back and sort of saying, okay, well, what is my purpose in the business? What is my purpose generally, without wanting to get too deep for what is meant to be a discussion about legal stuff. But isn't that important? Yeah, over coffee, that's right. But isn't it important to come back and check in and then find that passion? And it also comes to, we talked about the Deloitte study that talked about, the importance of purpose-driven organizations and the business reasons why it makes sense. But just anecdotally, I know I've had periods in the business where I've been tired and I've just wanted to step back and create rather than lead. And, I'm really in a phase in the business at the moment where I'm standing in the front and leading. And gosh, it's lovely to see, people who are working in an organization, they want that, they want to be part of a mission and they want to feel they're creating something more than just turning up and, tapping away at a keyboard in their working period, which is such a large part of their day. So anyway, I guess the point is step back, find your purpose, find some energy.
Yes.
And that will serve you in your business, but it'll also make you a much better target for selling ultimately.
Is there also work to be done around, and I know you do, one of your 5 Ps is process, and you put a lot of emphasis on process, because I guess that is a tangible thing that a buyer can both see, but also then be able to implement if there are clear processes in a business, as opposed to there, it operates because, such and such is there doing it, but without such and such, well, no one really knows how that happens. So, everything from, and I think often too, that they're the things when you're in business for a long time, you kind of forget, it's done, and all those intuitive things that we do because we do them and we know they work. But if you haven't written it down anywhere and it's not there for someone else to see, it's not really a process then, is it?
Yeah, no, exactly. And this comes back to, when people are looking to sell their business, and the first question I say, well, what's the value in the business? Because I need to understand that so I can make sure we're understanding how the value will transfer, because this is looking at the business from a buyer perspective. This is how we'll make sure that we make this a great deal and the deal will go through, right?
Yeah.
And so many people come to me sort of with sometimes that accountant answer of, what's the value in the business? It's the equipment and the goodwill. But that's not what buyers are buying. Buyers are buying the ultimate. What is it that they're buying? They're buying the access to your customer database, the way that you've run your business in a certain way that's been able to deliver the type of product or service that you've been able to deliver. They're buying the way that you've set your staff up, the knowledge that is in the business as a whole. And if you haven't found a way to set that out and to describe what that is in a way other than you're buying the equipment and the goodwill, you can see that it's not going to be a very attractive proposition for a buyer. You're probably not going to end up with, a whole heap of buyers fighting over the business. And it's about sort of getting deeper than that. It's the goodwill, and in doing that, creating something in a way that other people can recognize the value that you've created in your organization. Because how do they know you've got good systems and processes? How are they even going to get the benefit of those systems and processes if they're in your head?
Exactly. Yeah. And I think that's a good sort of, time to be thinking and, as you say, thinking like a buyer, looking inside to your business and going, okay, if I walked in tomorrow and picked this up, where would I start? And if that's not clear, then there's some to-do list items to probably take care of right there.
Yeah. And it doesn't have to be, I think that the obstruction to creating great solid businesses is often this feeling that it's all too big. There's too much to do. And there are quite a few pages in my book. And the one thing I would hate for someone to do is get to the end and then feel overwhelmed and then not get started. And I've always been a huge believer in action, but just start with small things. Small things regularly done will create a massive incremental change. And so really, ultimately, all it is about is 1, getting educated, 2, build a roadmap, 3, building small incremental steps along the way. But that education is the very, very key first point, because without that, you have no hope. When you're making decisions along the way, you don't know what's a good decision versus a bad decision. And sometimes they take as much effort to make a good decision as a bad decision. You know what I mean? But it's important to know.
And also that process when you're stepping back and looking at your own business, even if you're not actually planning to sell, is a really useful exercise. It's almost like a bit of a health check that you can do along the way. And I guess that's part of that growing phase, whether it is, it's not necessarily, maybe an acquisition path, but in terms of growth and how that fits together. Maybe we should just talk a little bit more about that growth phase in particular the big C word, which is cash flow. And that's the
Yeah.
one that I think a lot of SMEs are struggling with. And, you know, if we believe all the forecasts, it's going to be some choppy waters ahead, at least for the
Yeah.
next 12 to 24 months. Cash flow, and you actually, I think, give some very practical suggestions, even just in terms of billing terms, reviewing reviewing your customers, who's paying, who's not, really basic simple things. Do you
Yeah.
want to just give us a few of those tips that might help people with cash flow issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And as you say, I actually, you know, I've thought about this for a long time, you know, because it is such a critical thing for businesses. And lawyers quite often talk in terms of lawyers and accountants and advisors as a whole, you know, sort of talk in terms of like little bits, but it's about sort of stepping back and seeing the whole. And number one, it's about creating a review process so that you have this regular point in time where you come back and look at what's happening in the business. And then there's some legal things that you can do. You can put some terms and conditions in your documents. You can put some conditions in your terms and conditions document with your clients or customers that encourage faster payment. So, you know, you can add things like, you know, passing on any fees for enforcement costs, or adding interest for late payment, bringing in your payment terms from, you know, 30 days to 14 days or whatever. And it's not just about making changes in your terms, about communicating that with your clients right from the beginning. And so having it in a way that your clients understand. But then if clients aren't paying on time, doing something about it, having a system in place so that it's not you who has to remember, it's the system that works. And most of our accounting programs have these automatic statements that can go out, but you know, businesses just ignore statements quite often. So get a bit more creative, you know, have points where you have, you know, a couple of statements, then a manual email and someone different in the business sending the emails, and escalation processes that come in automatically. And then, you know, if there's an issue with clients starting to pay slower, there's two very key things that I like to point to. Number one, if you have clients who are very slow paying or start paying in round numbers rather than full invoices, they're paying, you can generally tell that they're having a cash flow issue themselves. And that's not to say that you stop supporting clients who are having cash flow issues. It's to be very aware and having open and honest conversations. And that's super important, because you don't want to be the last one to know that they're about to go under. So that's the first thing, because knowledge is key. The second thing is that if as a whole you're seeing sort of like a slowdown in payments, I highly recommend having a really strong system where you're surveying your clients in some way, shape or form. And there's, you know, some great tools and software that can do that from an automated perspective. And there's obviously many manual approaches for it. But whatever you do, you must be keeping a pulse on how happy your clients are, because sometimes slower payments are an indication of some other problem in your business. And the other problem in your business, you need to make sure you're tackling the right issues, you know. And if there's other problems in your business in relation to personnel, in relation to quality of goods or services, you need to tackle those things, because maybe that's the problem from a cash flow perspective. So, and I talk about lots of other things, but they're just a few little insights into things that maybe people don't necessarily always connect to a cash flow discussion.
I think that last one in particular, that sometimes the customer or the client might actually be just almost resenting paying the invoice because there's a problem, but they don't quite know how to broach it, or they kind of feel uncomfortable about having that discussion. So instead they're just sitting on the invoice, almost hoping that someone will pick up the phone for a chat.
Exactly. That's absolutely right. So,
and of course, and you don't want that chat about the chat to be about, hey, you haven't paid the invoice.
Yeah.
The chat should be about, you know, is there a problem?
Yeah. And there's so many other good reasons to keep a pulse on your customers' experience in dealing with you as an organization. Cash flow is just one of them, but it's one that's, hugely overlooked, I think. So, but it's also about that, happy clients do tend to pay quickly, and that is a reality. But, another tip is you can actually re-engineer the way you provide invoicing and services, sometimes by invoicing upfront, putting clients on retainers. There's a whole heap of other strategies as well. And I'm glad you brought it up, because I think it is something that is useful. It's so easy to sit down and say, okay, let's just create a review and let's just get started. And it is the one thing that could make a huge difference if you come to a point where we have issues from a business and economic perspective. You want to be ahead in the thought process there, not acting reactively.
And that's what I really love about the book, Joanna. You've done an amazing job. You haven't just approached it as, from a legal perspective. You need to have these clauses in your terms and conditions to ensure that if they don't pay, then this is what you do and this is the process for it. It really is very much a broader, holistic approach about everything in terms of what you can do on a day-to-day basis to make your business the best it can be. You do, and you talked about it right up front, risk and protecting yourself from risk. And that obviously means protecting your business, but also your personal self from risk. And I think, again, as we, the example you gave of the gentleman who was advised to declare bankruptcy, I don't think it would be any surprise that we're going to see a bit of an increase in the number of bankruptcies as people have found themselves in trouble. Are there things that we should talk about in terms of making sure that what happens in our business doesn't necessarily pull us and our whole families down?
Yeah. And I think one of the critical things is when you're facing tough times in the business, one of the most important things is to try to keep unemotional about it, which is so easy to say, so hard to do. But if you feel that your personal assets are exposed, I promise you, your ability to keep emotion out of it will be completely out the window, and so because I've absolutely seen situations of business owners who have felt, business in really hard times, and when they suddenly realize that there's elements of personal exposure, that they just lose it, and it's super, and it's a super stressful place to be in, and you don't want to be in that place. And so obviously there's a number of things: managing your cash flow, keeping a really hawk eye on the business, knowing the metrics to be watching, so that you understand what's going on in the business and can pull levers early. And not burying your head in the sand, because that's another thing that can happen when people feel things aren't working for them. One strategy is complete avoidance, and that's just so dangerous, so dangerous. You really need to tackle these things head on, but hand in hand with advisors who can help you, and with an empathic approach, and help you find solutions. But right in the beginning, so there's all of those things. You obviously want to stop the risk at the door, but there are these things in the background that can help. And I've always been an advocate of don't scare people when there really isn't. The likelihood of someone coming after you personally as a director of a business, to be completely frank, is quite low. It's just that if it happens, it's usually emotional. And if it's, I've seen instances of actions against allegations of directors insolvent trading, and it's not pretty, it's horrendous. And whilst the risk is very low, the emotion and the value of that risk is quite high, if that makes sense. I advocate, like just very simply speaking, it's great if directors cannot have assets in their own name. That helps. But that's not practical in many instances, because people will have bought their family home in, both of their names, and they'll have, but I tell you, the number of businesses that I see where you've got everyone in the family who are listed as directors is hilarious, because, really you should be trying to limit that to as few people as possible, within the context of, if you want control in a business, sometimes it makes sense to be a director, but you can get that control in a shareholders agreement, or, it sort of depends. But limiting directorships, or limiting the assets that you holding assets in trusts, is a great strategy, and it can be so beneficial for so many perspectives in terms of flexibility for you and your family unit into the future with the business, from a financial and a tax perspective, as well as an asset protection perspective. So there's all of those sorts of things, and then just some really simple practical things like, if suppliers give you a form with a personal guarantee, well, maybe don't sign it if it's not required. Push back on it in the first instance. And, in some instances, it's fair that there's a personal guarantee in there. In many instances, it's not, and I have seen, when you come to the point of selling a business, one of the things that, is very important for me to ask our sellers is, have you got any personal guarantees? And the answer will generally be no, or I don't know. And then they'll go, I say, could you just go reflect on that for a bit? Just go and have a look at your list of suppliers, and quite often we'll come up with this end list of all of these, personal
Which they didn't know about.
They didn't know about, they forgot about, so, if you're going to sign personal guarantees, know which ones you're signing, and make sure you keep it really clear, a clear list. But ideally don't sign personal guarantees if you don't have to. And with leases, this is another interesting thing. Many people think that they have to sign personal guarantees with leases. Well, we are in so many instances able to negotiate our clients out of that to have something else. And I just want to be really clear. The reason for me talking about the protection of assets is not in order to try and dodge people that you owe money to. I think that's a really important point, because that is not, that doesn't accord with my view of the world in what the way that we should be, acting from a business perspective. But you want to remove that emotion, and that's because emotion clouds your judgment.
Yes.
So, so I think they're really solid strategies, but of course, the most important strategy is to be ahead in the business, keep a hawk eye on what's going on in the business, have regular reviews, have great cash flow management strategies in place, and run it in a safe way.
And you have, obviously there's a lot of information in the book, which we've been featuring on our Women's Network Australia, the book group. But also it has these little QR codes throughout the book, which then link back to a whole lot of extra resources, like score sheets and templates and, all sorts of things. So as you say, there's a lot more value in the book than just the pages of it. And it's like it's a big book, but it's easy to read and it's easy to follow. And absolutely, I started underlining mine, so I obviously can't give it away to anyone, but but they can borrow it if they want to. But just the whole process of writing this book must have been a very interesting one for you as well, because there's a lot in it, and trying to get that into a book that's easy to follow, that's practical, but also interesting to read. So how did this process work for you?
Yeah, well, so I actually started by, I had a bit of a process in place, in that, I knew it was going to be the 3 parts. I knew sort of where I wanted to go in the parts. And then I thought, this is fine. I'll just download all of the stuff that I've said in my, 400 podcasts, and I'll just download what I said, and I'll get someone to mix it together. And so I did that. And, I wrote, a whole heap of words that way. And then I went back and read it and I went, well, that's crap. So I dumped that. And look, so I wrote it last year during the whole COVID lockdown, and I have 2 young kids, and so I was homeschooling a kindergarten child whilst running the business and writing this book. But do you know what? I committed to myself at that point, because I started writing and stopped a few times. And I wrote first thing in the morning, so I'd get up really early. So I'd get up, set my alarm at 3:30 in the morning generally, and get up and I'd write. But I read this fabulous book, Atomic Habits. I don't know if you've read it. I just love the book. And the one thing I took out of the book that really was a huge thing to me was this whole idea: if you want to get into a habit, then create it as a micro habit, just something really small, and just aim for that, and promise yourself you're going to do that. And so I did that. So I said, I absolutely promised myself I'm going to do, I can't remember if I said 2 minutes a day or 10 minutes a day, something like that, writing, which I thought, absolutely, I can do this, make a commitment that I can absolutely do, but absolutely commit to. So I made this commitment, right? And then we went into lockdown. And
yeah.
Homeschooling a kindergarten, whilst, also running this business in a really weird time.
Yes.
But I committed to myself. And this is the thing, because I had committed to myself, and because it was a micro commitment, I blessed that book, because I knew I could just keep my word to myself by doing something small. I did, and I just got into the habit, and I wanted to write a 30,000 word book, because that sort of 30 to 40,000 words is sort of like I wanted it to be easily accessible, and it's 90,000 words, so that, like, I clearly did not meet my, but I just couldn't stop. Yeah. I was just like, but I have to say this, and I have to say that. And I sent it to the editor, and I said, look, please cut it in half, chuck out heaps. I need it to be 30 to 40,000 words. But he came back to me and he said, look, I think you've got to keep it, and so I hope it's not too long. I tried super hard for it not to be, but I just couldn't stop.
No, it's great, and I think it may be the sort of thing that if people see themselves in any of those phases, but the wealth of the content and definitely that Fortify methodology, which we may not have time to go into today, but it's certainly covered in the book, and there's a series of steps around that. And I think that sort of approach is something that we can use in our businesses at any time, even if we're not thinking about exiting or selling or buying or even growing for that matter. But there's some really great tips and approaches there that, I think if we're all in that phase of thinking about the future and where our businesses are going, this is a great opportunity for people to tap into that, and also then the additional resources that you link to. So it's an incredibly generous book.
Thank you.
Which I think fits with your philosophy at the very beginning. It is about, that purpose and trying to avoid situations like that one you spoke of at the very beginning that obviously touched you as a young lawyer and stayed with you and have brought you to where you are.
I just, I love business. I love business owners, and I just like to see them succeed, because we have such an important role. We all hear about the statistics of small business being the engine house of the economy, and as employers, but we've got to look after ourselves as well. We've got to build strong businesses so that we can make a great impact out of what we're doing, and also then coming back and also reflecting on why we're doing it and the purpose behind it. But one of the things, just very quickly, that you talked about Fortify. I won't talk about the methodology, but the one thing I just want to say is disputes. I think business owners don't recognize the value of a strong legal infrastructure in their business until they have a dispute. Mm-hmm. And that might be, a staffing dispute, that might be a dispute with a customer, a supplier, a business partner, a shareholder, whatever the case may be. But when those disputes arise and issues occur in the business, and sometimes you can have the fact that a number of them start to arise together as well, because quite often that's a sign of a business that's grown very quickly where the legal infrastructure hasn't kept pace. But disputes, when business owners have that moment, they suddenly realize how much risk is sitting in their business, and
Mm.
they have a bit of a freak out moment, and they're like,
That's
I
the
just want to
technical
make
legal
the whole
term.
thing. Yeah, that's right. I just want to make the whole thing safe. But they've not really thought about that until the issue occurs. And my big push is about prevention, because prevention is so much easier, cheaper, and less emotional than having to find the cure. And of course, I talk about James where the business blew up, but it's not even about that. That's the worst case scenario, but it's not even about that. It's about having a business where little things are constantly going wrong, or there's little disputes that happen along the way that create stress, burden, a lack of focus on where you should be going as a business. So I think there is such a strong business reason to make sure that infrastructure of the business, including the legal infrastructure of the business, is solid, and that there are points where you come back to review it. And you talked about the resources for the book, and I tried hard to try and pack as much value as I could. I just wanted to provide value. And I thought, gosh, if someone's going to read this, I really must ensure that they get something good out of it in return. But there's 3 scorecards called scorecards that they're in the business for buy, grow, and exit. That makes sense, doesn't it?
Yes.
But the grow scorecard is actually based on a legal health check that I've done with businesses for decades, actually. And it is, that scorecard is sort of going in and sort of analysing where where risk normally is in a business that you may not be thinking about every day.
Yes.
And so I do, that's completely free.
Yep.
Highly recommend going and doing that. It's no cost, but it's just good for you to get an insight.
And of course, if you want to find out more from Joanna, Aspect Legal is the name of her business, but also the Deal Room and Talking Law are her podcasts, so you can dip into plenty more free information that way. It's been a delight to speak with you today.
And before
Joanna,
we go, I just want to say, for your listeners, we have a fabulous offer at the moment. So we're giving your listeners a discount for buying the book. So if I meant to have a slide here, and I don't think I've got it, but maybe you can distribute it somehow.
Of course, we will.
Wonderful. So we've got a discount for all of your listeners if they want to buy the book. And if you want to buy the book, you just use that discount code and you go to buygrowexit.com.au, and that's where you get the free scorecards as well, and all access to the resources, but also to buy the book with a discount code.
Thank you so much, and we'll share all of that information with our members. And good luck, and I hope you have some exciting travels ahead.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
It's a delight.